Hello, I'm the Dark Master. Welcome back to the Kirby, right back at ya Retrospective. In today's installment, we shall be covering episode 57, A Half-Baked Battle, or as it's known in the Japanese original, People Who Laugh at Pie, Cry in Pie. Kinda dark, yes, but it'll make sense in a bit. This episode was originally released on November 16th, 2002 as the 57th episode, whereas the English dub saw release on November 29th, 2003, again as the 57th episode. Without further ado or delay, let us start with the episode proper itself. The episode opens to a broadcast of Dreamland's number one program, Channel DDD, where there is a new show called the Quickie Cuisine Show, and right off the bat, we see several changes between versions. In the Japanese original, the show has a title card that reads DDD's 1 Minute Cooking. In the English dub, instead, it is replaced with a generic symbol of a clock with a chef hat. This was likely so they could change the name, but it just seems like a silly, unneeded change that nowadays just seems pointless. We then see Escargoon in a maid's dress, which I'm sure gets somebody off, introducing the concept of the show, and he explains as he and the Waddleys try to make food for the king in a short amount of time. Interestingly, it seems rather self-serving for a TV show concept, but I think it could work. It doesn't seem like the worst show. Regardless, Escargoon and the Waddleys get to work. It is here that we see the next change between versions. In the Japanese original, this scene has the background music being a rearrangement of the Orange Ocean theme from Kirby's Adventure, which I've reviewed, so check that video out if you're interested. 4Kids removed this honestly great music choice due to being so incompetent that they didn't get the rights to the audio tracks of the show, despite those usually being packaged with distribution rights. But anyway, true incompetence has never been seen at such a level. Regardless, Escargoon and Waddledees get to work as they create a rather messy crust. Sadly, despite their best efforts, they run a bit late as the king starts to get annoyed. They finish the crust and then put in the pan the filling, which causes even more messes. Eventually, they are seen putting the pie into the oven as the king has fallen asleep. It seems to be working fine at first, but rapidly starts to go wrong. It then eventually explodes and is sent flying into the confused king, who wakes up. There's a brief pause as everyone looks at the scene before Escargoon, the Waddle Dee staff, and Waddle Doo start laughing at the king, who is just left confused, as we then cut to the jazzy intro. After the jazzy intro, we see Kirby and Tokori laughing at the poor king. Escargoon describes the situation as he does a review of it. In the Japanese original, we then see a scene of the mayor, his wife, and grandkids laughing at the king. The English dub, for some silly reason, decided to cut this out, likely to save time, and instead we cut to Chief Bookums and his wife laughing at the king. Then there is some colorful commentary from Escargoon before we see Professor Curio laughing at the king. We see an instant replay and then the next change between versions. In the Japanese original, Escargoon justifies all that he's doing by claiming that he's trying to solve the mystery behind why the incident happened, using face-sticking mystery investigation committee as an excuse, whereas the English dub, he just laughs at the king's suffering. No idea why this was changed for 4Kids, except maybe to make him seem more malicious, but it's really not all that notable of a change since the excuse in the Japanese original is just so transparent. Then we see Tuggle and Gus laughing at the king. Then there is a scene of Kawasaki, Gus, and other customers laughing at the king, which was luckily not cut out of the English dub. We then see a short scene of Mabel and Samuel at the bar laughing at the king's misfortune in the Japanese original. Again, the English dub saw 4Kids remove this short scene, likely due to the reference of illicit material such as alcohol within it. Though nowadays it just seems sort of quaint, boomer-esque type censorship that really is no longer needed. In the Japanese original, we also see yet another removed scene of Spikehead and his family. No idea why this was removed, maybe to better fit within US time slots, but whatever. Regardless, the next scene of Iroh and his family was thankfully not completely removed, and we then sadly see yet another scene that 4Kids saw fit to remove, that being of Kirby and the wretched bird Kokori laughing at the king's misfortune. Now, on one hand, it further shows how widespread the king's embarrassment has gone, that everyone is laughing at him. But on the other hand, the less Takori there is in an episode, the better it is, so either version is fine. We then see the king walking down the castle halls complaining about the whole affair. He hears laughter coming out of Tiff's family room. He peeks in and sees that Tiff and her family, as well as Folo and Fala, are watching the event again. He walks in and for a moment they pause, shocked by his arrival, but then resume laughing at the tyrant. Sir Edwin says he's quite the comedian, while Tiff laughs at the classic joke. We see Escargoon comment on the situation, and Ladylike says while he has made her family scream a lot, this is the first time it's been in laughter, and so Dee Dee runs off in a huff. We cut to the newsroom where we see Escargoon has set up a dummy of the king as he tries to recreate forensically the pie incident, which of course causes the whole town to laugh and is just an excuse to get more ratings. However, the king arrives and pokes him on the shoulder, which causes Escargoon to stammer a bit before the king decides to slap him in the face with a pie. The king then proceeds to laugh at his servant. However, it turns out that Escargoon wisely prepared for the king's petty revenge and grabs himself some pies and then proceeds to hit the laughing king. We then see the two goobers hitting each other with pies, and of course the Waterleys and Waterloos also get pie in the face via the crossfire. Waddle-Doo then decides to try and break things up. The two bickering fools are annoyed at his interjection, but then see the various cabbays are laughing at the pair of buffoons. The king is upset at this, while Escargoon is a bit more positive, saying that the king should be happy, as this is the first time he's had a successful show. However, DDD dismisses his servant's suggestions, saying that the 1-minute cooking show was cancelled. Escargoon bemoans this as it was the biggest hit show they'd had so far, but the king says that they're not going to like what hits them next. We cut to the next day as we see the townsfolk like Gengu, Gus, Kawasaki, Melman the Mailman, Professor Kirio, Buttercup, Hannah, Mabel, the mayor, Spikehead, Tiff Tuff, and Kirby discussing the incident, but are interrupted by the arrival of the king in his limousine, followed by his Waddle Dee film crew and a covered wagon. This bemuses the group as they wonder what is going on. King Deity gets upon his limousine and declares that since they laughed at him, he's decided to cancel their favorite TV show, 1 Minute Cooking. The mayor tries to reason with him, but is cut off when the king announces that his brand new reality show is starting, Pie Justice, as the Waddle Dees reveal piles of pies are in the wagon. This confuses the crowd, with the mayor saying that's quite an odd name for a TV show, while Bookums admits it does sound somewhat interesting. Didi explains that the show will have them chasing down jaywalkers and litter bugs. Escargoon clarifies that said criminals will be pied in the face. It is here that we see the next change between versions. In the Japanese original, King Dedede refers to his reality show as Execution by Pie Show, and Escargoon explains that it is a live show about execution without trial. As you can see, the English dub toned it down quite a bit in order to protect children from references to death, but I have to admit, I think it grossly neuters the king's threat. And honestly, the Japanese original is just superior, because there's nothing more metal than a live TV show about execution. Understandably, this alarms the crowd. Tuff says that this is not fair, with Tiff saying that this is pretty low even for the King's channel. But Dee Dee says that they are guilty of slander and instructs Escargoon to instruct the Waterleys to put pies in catapults that then hit Iroh, Kirby, and Tuff. Tiff manages to dodge while the cowardly Tokori flies away. Tuff is understandably upset, but Kirby enjoys the food. Chief Bookums calls his abuse out, as he's the law of the land, not the king's pie posse. The king accuses him of disorderly conduct and gets pied in the face. The mayor asks if they can be reasonable, and Mabel warns the king that such is disrespectful, and Samo tells him not to use them as target practice. The king accuses them of treason for no reason, and they then pie him. Samo white knights for Mabel, taking 2 pies to the face, and Tiff says that he can't just do that, and Tokori says that they got rights. Luckily, the king decided to oppress his rights by pieing that wretched, horrible bird Tokori. Mabel, however, has had enough and takes the pie off poor Samo's face and then throws it at the king, which causes everyone to laugh at the king, who then orders retaliation as the pies are fired into the crowd, punching a bunch of innocent cappies in the face. Chief Bookums gets sick of this and tries to arrest the king, but a lot of orderlies toss a bunch of pies at him and he falls over. Despite this, cappies continue to rebel, throwing pies back at the orderlies. Cliff looks at this whole affair with contempt as the whole town gets into a pie fight. Buttercup manages to avoid getting pied by using her parasol as a defense. Meanwhile, Kirby is just stuffing his face with pie, happy at the whole affair. We see Samuel and the others fighting back, and Kirby eats some more as Tiff gets upset at the food waste. The king says that the cappies couldn't hit the ocean with a beach ball when Tiff walks up to him and lambasts the king for wasting food and resources. The king decides to send the heavy artillery at her, but Kirby saves her by eating all the pies. The king gets annoyed at this and raises his hammer to smash him. Before he can, however, a bunch of cappies pie him, causing him to fall down. Escargoon peers down at him and asks if he's okay. The king says he's a little pie-shocked before more pies hit him. Escargoon orders the troops of Waddle Dees to fall back, and so the gang of troublemakers flee the scene. We then cut to that afternoon as we see the entire town has become silent as the whole population has been consumed by the pie mania, with Gus, Tuggle, Mabel, Samo, and some other adults waiting in place to pie anyone that they see. In the Japanese original, this scene is a bit longer with some additional random cabbies, but 4Kids seemed for some reason to remove this in order to better fit within US time slots. Given that these are generic cabbies, I don't really have much of a complaint, but it's still a shame to see. We see Tough, Iroh, Spikehead, and Honey hiding out as we hear the next change between versions. In the Japanese original, the following scene plays a rearrangement of the Candy Mountain theme from Kirby Superstar. It sounds really good. Shame that 4Kids English dub had to remove it due to their incompetence in getting a license for their programming. Regardless of the background music, we see the kids are getting pied in the face after trying to walk through the area. The kids retreat as we see the chef Kawasaki taking advantage of the situation to sell a boatload of pies. I respect this enterprising spirit. However, then, Tiff rains on the parade by calling him out for profiting off this crude fad of pie throwing. But he points out how it's not as bad as if they ate his pie. The mayor shows up alongside other cabbies to buy his pies. Tiff bemoans the adults for being so wasteful, but the mayor dismisses her concerns, saying it's clean fun. The police chief Bookham says there's nothing wrong except getting custard on the face. Dr. Yabu points out rightfully that this is aerobic exercise, but Tiff, however, says that this is all one of the king's plots, saying that he's planning something while they're distracted and running around. We then cut to the throne room as we see the enemy sales guy delivering the king a thank you basket for his pieria. Gosh, that sounds disgusting. The king, however, dismisses his practical joke and explains the problem to the salesperson via a dream sequence. I really like how the background of this scene has a Crayola design to it that really plays into Dedede's man-child mind. We see that he wants to pie Kirby and show him what's for, but that the pink puffball eats anything thrown at him. The king says that he's no match for his belly and says he needs a pie monster. The enemy sales guy says he luckily has just the thing he was looking for, but warns the king that the creature may be too much to stomach even for him, as we see the monster silhouette appear in the teleporter. We then cut to the next day as we see the townsfolk have, led by Tiff, constructed a makeshift fort akin to the Bastille. She calls to Kawasaki to make sure everything is ready, and the chef confirms that all the pies are here. And Tiff says she hopes that they won't have to use them, and the terrible bird Takore makes a pie pun worthy of the death sentence. But Samo alerts them of the arrival of the king. In his limousine, the king says that it's illegal to block off the road, with Escargoon saying that the thugs deserve some pie justice. The mayor says they're sick of the pies, with Chief Bookums getting a massive turnaround saying that he's tired of spending a lot of money to clean his uniform. Escargoon then says that the king is passing a new law. The king announces that it is now a treasonous act to say the word Poyo. In addition to being a clear attempt to harm Kirby, this is also the first time in the English dub that someone said the word Poyo other than Kirby. Strange that it took more than half a series to do that, but it is an interesting, if somewhat obscure, trivia point. Kirby says it, unaware of what exactly is going on, and a pair of these bring Kirby over for judgment. Kirby says Poyo 3 more times as we see Dedede fire 4 pies at Kirby, who of course proceeds to eat them. Askew says this was expected as the others cheer. The king gets annoyed, and after Kirby says Poyo some more, the king decides to throw pies at him himself. He keeps doing so, but Kirby keeps eating them. We cut to see Tough saying that rightfully this isn't really much of a punishment. Takori makes a worthless and utterly trash statement, and the mayor and Chief Bookums point out how ineffective this treatment of Kirby is, and they all laugh. But the king says he's got something that will fix Kirby's appetite. Tough asks a clarifying question, and the king points to his castle as we see the monster Belly Buster floating into town. Since he's introduced properly here, let's talk about him for a bit now. So this is Belly Buster, or as he's called in the Japanese original, Power Stomach, which will make sense later in the episode when we get to a second form, but it's actually meant to be a pun because in the Japanese word for stomach, when you replace the word in katakana with the one in kanji, it's pronounced pawai, which is close to the Japanese word for pie, which is pie. It doesn't really make sense out of Japan, so I understand why the change was made in the English dub, as it just kind of doesn't really work. So this first form resembles a large floating pie with cream filling, a red jelly core, 5 orange hands, each bearing a frying pan, and 2 waffle-like objects that serve as buns. The voice actor is not credited, but they do a fine enough job on its own. The Japanese original has them say the names of pies, like cream pie or meat pie, and just saying pie a lot. While in the English dub, he just makes these sort of growls that sound like they were recorded underwater. Both are fine, I guess. Overall, a decently well-designed, if gimmicky monster that I honestly think really could work in the games with relative ease. I will speak about his other form when it shows up as to not spoil anything, but you've been warned. Resuming with the plot, the monster summons the pie and under the king's instruction pelts Kirby with the pie, which Kirby, due to its size, is not able to inhale it right away. Belly Buster continues to pelt Kirby, literally covering his whole body with pie, much to everyone's shock as Tough asks why he's not eating it. Indeed, this is the first time in the anime that Kirby refused to eat something. The king laughs as Escargoon says they finally defeated Kirby. Tiff and the others go to Kirby, who, after a bit, managed to escape the pile of pies, which, of course, gets everyone else covered in pie, as Kirby looks innocently after accidentally getting them covered with it. The king then sets Belly Buster on the cappies, as Belly Buster then pies the various cappies, except Buttercup, who remains not pied due to her umbrella. The king laughs at this, but then gets a taste of his own medicine as Bellybuster pies him and Escargoon indiscriminately. He then hits the Waddle-Dees and Waddle-Doos. More get pied, and then it targets Kirby, who dodges this and allows Tiff to get pied as you see the next change between versions. As in the Japanese original, there is an instant replay of her getting hit from various angles. 4Kids, for some reason, saw fit to remove this. And this seems kind of like a dumb change, as it really emphasizes how big these pies are, because they are big. Tiff is understandably upset at Kirby for not sucking it up and saving her like he did last time, and demands a reason. She decides to taste the pie, curious, and well, it is disgusting to the chagrin of the monster. Tuv says that they taste disgusting, with Professor Kira saying they're worse than Kawasaki's cooking. The monster looks around and we see everyone, Waddle-Dees, Cappies included, gagging at the pie. The king and Escargoon try it themselves and are disgusted, the snail comparing it to shaving cream. Ugh. Much like a typical progressive, Bellybuster seems unable to handle the constructive criticism as we see tough comment on the situation, as we then see the next change between versions. In the Japanese original, Tokori has a short scene where he tells the monster if he's going to throw them, they should at least taste good. 4Kids saw fit to removing this scene, and honestly, it's a good change because Tokori is garbage, and the less that he talks, the better, even if it admittedly does make the scene a little more awkward, but I don't think it really impacts it that much. Escargoon says they should take his cooking license away. Tiff says it's flaky, which I don't get that one. It looks more creamy, if anything, but Mena points out how Bellybuster has taken on a strawberry coloration. Tuff asks what is going on, and Mennonite explains that they've insulted the monster's pie, and the two siblings comment on this. In the Japanese original, they say that because he's a pie specialist, getting his pies insulted is particularly harmful, while Kawasaki, who's not a pie specialist, doesn't get as angry. The monster then goes mad and starts pieing everyone way more. It tries to hit Mennonite, who manages to dodge it. He asks where Kirby is, and we see that the poor pink puffball is hiding from the monster. Tiff tells Kirby to suck it up, but for the first time in the anime series, he refuses Tiff's order to suck it up, which confuses the girl as Tuff says it's too gross for even Kirby to eat, while Kawasaki says it's even worse of a cook than he is. We see Bellybuster has become deranged, is now taking everything as an attack, and so charges the group. We then see the final change between versions here. In the Japanese original, Mennonite says this is awful. It reacted to Kawasaki's words as an attack. Tiff then points out that Mennonite also just said the word awful, and I kid you not, Mennonite says, oh shit, before he gets pied by Bellybuster. In the English dub, he says instead, he tells them to jump, and he ends up getting pied. Now, the obvious reason for kids remove this was in order to remove profanity, and while I can kinda understand 4Kids' perspective, I don't know, I think it makes the scene far more awkward, because they don't quite word it right. I feel like you could have definitely changed the dialogue here, and would have felt better, because honestly, it just feels like Bellybuster pied him for no reason. And honestly, the idea of the stalwart Meta Knight who is so calm against all sorts of various monsters, he just loses it to a pie one. I don't know, it's just hilarious. As I see Mennonite just ends up getting grossed out. We then see Kirby fleeing from the pie monster as Tiff says that Deity finally found Kirby's one weakness and laments that he will be finally able to chase Kirby out of Dreamland for good. The king and Escargoon, however, not enjoying the victory and so try to make an escape, but the custard is so thick that it acts like mud and they've gotten stuck. Escargoon freaks out as they see Kirby run into the limousine as Bellybuster follows close behind after him and splats its body into the limousine like a bug on a windshield, spraying custard innards everywhere. Tiff recovers and asks where the monster is, but Mennonite points out that it's emerging, and we see its second form, which is literally a giant yellowish stomach with creepy red eyes. The name makes a lot more sense now, doesn't it? It's honestly a bit of a step down in terms of design and really all aspects, but I guess it's fine enough for what it is. We see the King, Escargoon, and Kirby and the limousine are lodged in its top, where it is then swallowed. Tiff asks Meta Knight what exactly is going on, and he explains that they will be ingested. Now, some have complained and pointed out that Mennonite is technically wrong here, as the stomach only physically slash chemically breaks down the food, and most digestion actually occurs in the intestines. However, I would push back on that by saying it's not an actual human stomach, rather it's a monster designed after one, and in all likelihood, it probably absorbs all its food directly in the stomach. Plus, stomach acid would still break down these people. Do you have any idea how strong it is? The stomach literally has to have a lining so it doesn't escape. The king wonders what is going on until the popped tires make it evident, and Escargoon explains what is going on. The king, however, says that he has a plan for just something like this and pulls out a bomb. Escargoon points out that the bomb will also destroy them. The king is shocked, while Escargoon says that he never thinks his plans out and that they always bomb in the end. But the king accepts his fate and says, well, they can't do anything about it now except to go out with a bang. The king tosses the bomb, and Escargoon looks at it, but then looks at Kirby and tells him to suck it up, which Kirby does so in order to become. Ah, Bomb Kirby. Last seen in episode 51, Kirby takes the cake, which I've reviewed in the past, so check that out if you want more information on both that episode and the bomb ability, but to keep it brief, I think it transitioned into the anime well, and it has the classic bomb design, which in my mind is far superior than the newer one. Resuming with the plot, Escargoon cheers at Kirby as Kirby then proceeds to throw bombs in such a manner that they harm the monster while not killing the king and Escargoon. We see Bellybuster getting killed from the inside out, and man, that just sounds awful. Can you imagine having a bomb in your stomach? Eventually, it explodes as we see Kirby falling from the sky, much to Tiff's chagrin. Meta Knight politely asks Buttercup for her umbrella, which he then tosses to Kirby, who catches it and then uses it to float down. Note, this is not Parasail Kirby, despite what some sources claim. And we see the King and Escargoon, however, are not so lucky, and they end up falling into the layer of custard. Luckily, they don't die, instead simply get covered in that disgusting pie filling, and after a bit of silence and a pie-based pun from Bookums, everyone laughs at the king, proving that they got the last laugh, and also proving that those that try too hard to avoid ridicule often fall into it themselves. Kirby gently floats down, and the episode ends with Kirby leaping down, as Tiff is a bit concerned. Now, let's talk about the episode's positives, negatives, and my final thoughts. First, starting with positives, I actually have to praise the plot a bit. Now, yes, it must be stressed that the plot does rely on the pun, the face pun, and jokes, so if you don't really find all that kind of funny, then yes, some parts will feel a bit stretched out. I myself am not much of a pie guy. I prefer cake. But there was, even for me, some scenes that I found quite hilarious. Plus, I think there's enough depth beneath the surface, if you look for it, that it's enjoyable for really anyone. For example, it offers a critique of the vapidity of reality TV and how it can be so easily weaponized against other people. The episode also offers a moral on the folly of egotistical people, especially those in power, trying to end the mockery of themselves, and that those attempts often lead to more such mockery in the form of the Streisand effect. Instead, we should accept criticism, or if it's invalid, ignore it, especially if it comes from trolls, like pedantic pedestrians, who are not interested in discourse in any level of depth. I also thought that Bellybuster was an interesting concept that honestly was really neat, even if the second form was not quite as solid, and I hope to see in the game sometime. Bomb Kirby, again, was very well utilized, as I think his usage stood out, as instead of one big bomb to end the monster, it took a bunch of little bombs that were strategically placed. I even thought Meta Knight was well done in the episode for as short as his role was. A lot of the side characters were also, in my opinion, well done. I thought that they all played a role except for Takori. It is here, though, that the negatives I saw begin to pile up. And yeah, they mainly result from 4Kids localization. There's the removal of some darn good music, the replacement of perfectly fine text, and some poorly thought out dialogue changes that only hampered the episode. But then again, one of the changes did remove a scene with Takori, so it's not all entirely bad. Even still, though, this is a very average episode. In fact, I would consider it the first gimmick episode, meaning that it pretty much relies on one thing and stretches that out to the entire length of an episode. If you find puns funny, then you'll likely like the episode. If you don't, at some points it honestly just becomes bland. So overall, this is a perfectly fine average episode. I think it's worth at least one watch, but don't feel bad if you decide to skip it, as there really isn't much to it anyway. Anyway, I'm the Dark Master, and if you like this video, like it, but if you love it, consider subscribing, and have a nice day.